Hello, everyone. My name is Elliot Markowitz, and I'm the Director of Strategic Content, Marketing Solutions here at ALM. And welcome to today's webcast titled Legal Metrics That Matter, Defining Success Beyond Spend Management. And this event is brought to you by Legal Tech News and sponsored by Hyperion. I will be your moderator for this event, but before we get to the topic, let's get some simple housekeeping items out of the way first, and this is all to make your experience just a little bit more valuable. First, if you have a question for one of our speakers, please type it in the Ask a Question field in your console. We will get to your question during the event or during the live Q&A at the end of the event, depending on how much time we have. We will answer as many questions as possible, so we invite you to ask away and ask often. If we do not get to your question, you may receive an email response, so please don't be shy. You can also go to the widget icon, and you can download a copy of today's slide, and that may be useful for you. It's located under Resources, and you click on the Resource Center widget, and you can download a copy of today's presentation. In addition, there are some other customizable functions to be aware of. There is a group chat widget, so click on that if you want to start or participate in a group chat. On every window you currently see, and that's from the slide window to the Q&A pane, they can either be enlarged or collapsed, so if you want to change the look and feel of your console, go right ahead and do so. Just remember, the more interactive you are, the more valuable of an experience this will be for you. Now let's get to today's topic and why you are all here. Well, measures are a core component of responsible business management. That's especially true for legal practice management. While quantitative measures are not appropriate for all business activities, performance metrics and key performance indicators, or KPIs, are an increasingly critical part of optimizing the legal function. Developing a data-based framework for understanding the work you do can be a catalyst for true operational transformation. You need to know what's working and what's not. However, how do you identify the data to collect and the process to measure? How do you define qualitative benchmarks? How do you derive success factors? Even, what protocols should you put in place to ensure you are measuring accurately? All great questions. Well, here with us today to discuss these issues are Eyal Ifrgen, he's Managing Principal at Hyperion, Jane Bennett, Director of Enterprise Legal Management, and Christopher O'Connor. He's Senior Research Analyst for Hyperion's ELM, ECM, and Workflow Automation Practices. Certainly an esteemed panel. So please take it away, folks.
Thanks, Elliot. This is Eyal Ifrgen speaking with Hyperion Global Partners. So let me introduce the session quickly and the group that's here. We're here to talk about key performance indicators and how to sort of measure performance in an organization to optimize what we call operational performance, right? Quickly sort of about us, Hyperion Global Partners, who we are, also maybe sort of known as why we think we're qualified to speak on this topic. So Hyperion Global Partners is a business and technology consulting firm, and we specialize in business advisory to legal organizations, law firms, and generally Global 1000 corporations. We focus as an organization on what we call practice management. We define that as process, operations, organization, and technology. In shorthand, the business of law as opposed to the practice of law. And as a consulting organization, we're styled sort of, I think, very differently from other traditional modes in that we're set up as a consultancy of experts. So everyone that comes to Hyperion comes to us with many years of experience in their sort of respective space and are generally well regarded in what they do. We take that expertise as a sort of core part of our model and express it in sort of many ways in what we sort of define as solutions to the marketplace. Those expressions of expertise are derived in the form of proprietary methodologies and solutions and approaches to, again, sort of practice management challenges that legal organizations face. We also, as a sort of major component of that expertise, have formed, shortly after our founding, a division of Hyperion called Hyperion Research. Hyperion Research is designed to sort of, as an expression of this expertise, we're an analyst-based primary research organization to the legal solutions marketplace. We make it sort of our job to understand the solutions, the vendors, the providers of both software and services into the legal market in the various areas of expertise that we advise in and on, and our clients come to us for sort of the knowledge, benchmarking, trends, and analysis, as well as sort of deep insight on the various solution providers, their approaches to the market, and the kinds of solutions that they bring to bear. Our enterprise legal management practice, which is the practice that sort of brings you this presentation today. In terms of ELM, which is a phrase that we coined several years ago, is the extension of what is traditionally in the space been regarded as matter management and e-billing. Matter management has been a discipline in legal for about 20 years now, maybe even a little more, and our expertise dates back to the beginning of the discipline, and many in our organization have sort of been at vendors, at corporations and law firms, and in consulting organizations through the time in that discipline. Our enterprise legal management practice is certainly founded around the core disciplines of matter management and e-billing, but certainly to a much broader extent to deal with issues of information architecture and data modeling, translating the data that we collect in organizations and the way we manage the work that we do into legal performance and operational management best practices and expertise. And certainly we use all of those sort of core areas to translate into performance metrics, how we actually measure what it is that we do as an organization, what are the kinds of things we should be looking at, and how we use that data to improve operations, both at tactical level, sort of on-the-ground types of problems and issues as they might arise, but also much more sort of strategic as organizational initiatives. Our experience in the space is, next slide. Well, I think we're having some technical difficulties on getting the slides. Okay. So our experience in the space is broad, having worked with the world's leading sort of corporations, intellectual property and patent and sort of innovation owners, and the largest, most complex law firms around the world. Our experience with KPIs, right, and it's sort of the measure of performance, the development of metrics that define what it is that we measure, comes from our broad work across the profession with many and varied industries. And so, let's talk about key performance indicators. I'll turn this over to Chris with the threshold question: what are KPIs?
Thank you, Eyal. As mentioned, this is Chris O'Connor, and I'm very happy to help lead today's discussion. As Eyal said, KPIs do indeed stand for key performance indicators, and as we'll demonstrate, every word in this increasingly vital term of art is operative. These creations serve as critical, crucial data points, statistics, and calculations to drive the management and ultimate success of legal organizations. By legal organizations, we mean both corporate law departments and law firms. The goal of a KPI is to measure elements of performance along variables of importance to the organization. To use the explicit language of the term, KPIs indicate. They paint a picture. They reflect moments in time. They tell a story of movement of how your organization progresses towards achieving its goals and realizing strategies. A major exercise in developing a robust KPI program is studying and determining the brand and the level of indication your legal organization desires and needs, and then reducing the related metrics into the form of diagrams and charts. And really, because a KPI is a unit of actionable intelligence, it is a beginning and not an end. This is really the visibility you need to begin solving organizational problems and correcting unwanted or unexpected trends. The magic here is not exclusively in the number. KPIs are either quantitative or qualitative. Now, what do we mean by that? The quantitative KPI is an objective measure, whereas the qualitative KPI is a subjective measure. More specifically, quantitative KPIs are metrics derived from units of measurements. These can be simple statistics, annual revenues, total headcount per quarter, those types of things. They can also be means or medians or averages or aggregated statistics. And the answers that they provide are more factual-based. What, when, how much, how long. It's not always appropriate to, in all instances, to go the quantitative route, as the numbers may not reflect the variable that you truly seek to illustrate. Now, qualitative KPIs, on the other hand, often result from unique combinations of existing quantitative metrics. They're shaped to drive cross-analyses that get at performance measurements of specific value to the organization or the managing or reporting party. And they're really meant to help answer more investigatory questions. Why? Why not? How well? How close are we? How close are we not? These are not always numeric, as evidenced by, you can see, B+. You can have scorecards or you can have judgment calls. And in some cases, they take considerable conceptual work and careful planning to create. Now, KPIs can also either be comparative or predictive. And really, you can also categorize these or label these as lagging indicators and leading indicators. By comparative, it's very self-explanatory. You're comparing data points. These can be across time, across sectors, across matter types. You could be looking at individual responsible parties or attorneys, outside vendors, year to year, quarter to quarter. What you're doing is building an indication line, again, using that term, a trend line, and looking at, okay, so what happened in this bucket as opposed to this bucket, and really sort of spotting where things are and what are the areas for improvement and correction. On the other side, we have predictive. Now, this is meant to reflect what a number or a metric ought to be, and it's often used as an evaluation metric. One example: take what is expected as a common matter scenario or profile, and calculate what a matter with that common standard or profile should cost and how much time it should take. And with that said, now that we've given you the context of what KPIs are and how to think about them and classify them, Jane Bennett will now discuss the specific uses of KPIs within legal.
Hi, my name is Jane Bennett. And so when we talk about KPIs relevant to legal, KPIs typically, regardless of the organization that is looking at it, fall into one of these 5 categories: operational, process, performance, financial, or service level. What we've done on this sheet is given you an interpretation of each one of these different ways of thinking about KPIs within your organization and tried to give you the perspective from within a legal organization. Operational KPIs are an internal measurement. They're not typically what we include when we're talking about legal KPIs, but it is in fact something that can be measured within a legal organization. Process KPIs are based on matter information, and really your ability to look at process KPIs depends on the extent to which these are built out in your systems for tracking. Performance KPIs are much more subjective. These are things where you're really rating on your own individual scale work that is being done by someone or something. Financial KPIs are pretty easy. They're based on invoice data in legal. It's probably the category that's used most often, and in some cases it's the only dimension that's looked at within legal. Service level KPIs, well, these are easy. It's also an element of invoice data, and we are able to base those on the UTBMS coding that's used and also the hours associated with the time entries. So we had done, actually I'd like to pass this to Al to talk a little bit about...
Just a quick sort of, element of research to sort of add to the conversation. We sort of poll continuously the marketplace, and in 2014, sort of polled legal organizations on sort of areas of performance management. I think none of this will actually surprise people. 98%, clearly sort of the highest sort of level of systems for looking at performance measurement are the legal spend. It's always the first system consulted, or the first type of data consulted. The first system typically consulted is the e-billing, financial, and/or matter management systems, depending on the organization. I think that what we see sort of as and this has sort of been the way, right, for time ad nauseum, but what we're starting to see is sort of a growth in maturity and then the discipline at looking at performance measurements in other sort of more qualitative areas, right? So, caseload and utilization, another sort of segment, nearly two-thirds of the organizations we polled look at caseload and utilization as a factor. Clearly, the fact that the billable hour rules utilization is always a number that sort of is derived from that, so that makes a lot of sense. But things like quality and outcomes, we see far, third to spend management, but significant number for this survey, and I think sort of more importantly, growing. And it's how we sort of define quality and outcomes and how we aggregate data at our fingertips from the systems we use every day to start to look at those metrics. I think we'll start to see both not just sort of growth in that column on a poll like this, but certainly in the maturity that that column speaks to.
Okay, one more bit of information about this slide. It pretty much tracks the development of the e-billing and matter management history discipline itself. We started with the e-billing systems as just a pipeline to receive spend information. We finally added some information on the case to make it a little more fulsome. And then, we finally did recognize that by adding outcome information and how a matter was resolved, we were able to bring in these types of quality and outcome metrics that are necessary. Obviously, this last category here, dealing with quality and outcomes, is something that we still need to focus on and increase the capacity of older systems that are out there to include this information.
Let's go to quantitative metrics. We're going to walk you guys through some examples of quantitative and qualitative metrics, both for law firms and law departments, and the kinds of organizing around sort of legal metric and performance measurement that we work with our clients on these days.
As you'll see, we begin here by giving examples of quantitative metrics. Now, you'll see that a number of these examples are focused on financials. As Jane had said, that's a lot of times people associate KPIs with spend management. But that's not solely the case, as you'll see here. So for law departments, you'll see that we have the comparison of the budgeted and intended spend versus what you actually spend. And so you can monitor your performance there. We also have annual legal spend versus the total revenue of the corporation. So you can get a sense of the intensity or how much legal spend there is. I mean, the higher the percentage, obviously, the more of a
greater
flag.
The
yes, the greater the flag. And then the next one, there's a lot of different variations, but this is something that a lot of folks are starting to use in law department management, which is inside versus outside in terms of spend. You can do this as a percentage ratio. How much of your total spend is going outside? You have the ratio of internal spend to external spend. You could have the total amounts side by side. Other examples, and this is where we get into more operational metrics. We have staff attorneys per million or $1 billion of revenue, and then we have the number of open matters by matter type, outside firm, internal responsibility, responsible party, or other categories, and that's really a good tool for measuring volume and workload and making decisions on assignments and who you want to work with as vendors. And then internal versus external research costs, that's coming up more and more as well. For the law firm side, you'll see that a few of these are close corollaries to ones that we just went over for the law departments. In this case, we have total attorney salary versus total revenue as an operational metric, and we have the ratio of attorneys to administrative staff, or leverage, as it's often called. We talk about that in parentheticals. Legal vendor spend, much like tracking outside spend, that's just a way to monitor how much you're spending and who you're spending it with. Income to debt ratio for operational and financial management, that's obviously critical. And then one that in the next slide we'll look at, or I believe not, actually scratch that in the next slide. There's something related to it, but profit margins by service or practice area. This is really a breakdown to see which practice groups are more efficient and profitable than others. Two other examples, payment cycle times, and then related to AFAs or alternative fee arrangements is fee revenue per matter for new clients. Really what you're measuring there is what the amount of value of the work that you're doing and the amount that you traditionally be billed or billing versus what you're actually collecting, and really measuring that delta.
So nothing new really in any of this, I don't think, or sort of particularly novel, for most organizations. It's not, can we measure all of these things as we sort of been through this. All of this data is sort of available at our fingertips as organizations, and we've been spending the last 20 years putting systems in to track all of these things. It's about sort of organizing around it and tying the raw data, the on the ground, what do we do on a matter-by-matter basis to sort of understand it in the context of types of matters, jurisdictions of matters, and how we execute on our matters, really starting to tie, what happened at how the matter ended versus how the matter began, and things like that. The other sort of important part of it then is numbers are fine and they're interesting, but they're relatively sort of one-dimensional. The point of KPIs also is to chart them, right? To sort of take a look at numbers and various sort of dimensions in our organization and paint pictures. In fact, the point of charting a KPI is to sort of paint a picture of the organization, parts of the organization, and how we're performing, whether it's comparative in a matter-by-matter, practice-by-practice, or year-over-year, and starting to develop an understanding. In this particular sort of example, as an example, percent of total legal spend by matter type, I think sort of a series of data that's difficult to obtain or to chart. But, in looking at it, we get to spot things like, hotspots in the data, that there is a relatively sort of constant stream of spend, for example, in litigation, but a huge spike in the last year in this example. Also, as a percent of total legal spend as opposed to absolute dollar amounts, what spikes like that do to spend and budgets and capabilities across other parts of the legal organization as well, all of which can derive into sort of actionable data to do something about it, whether it's about mitigating issues or optimizing performance in other areas.
Now, here we have slides dedicated to qualitative metrics for both law departments and law firms. And as with quantitative KPIs, here's an array of examples of qualitative KPIs with which we've become familiar. As you'll see, these are generally more intricate and dynamic, and they really drill down into the relationships between variables and to the search for subjectively desired causality. So to run down our list, we have the number of budget revisions by matter or by firm or by practice area, really just sort of keeping track of who is staying on budget and who's fudging. The next one, this was actually mentioned on an earlier slide, looking at the correlation and the cause and effect between your investment in and effort towards early case assessment and the outcomes of cases on the back end. There's also subjective scorecarding, and much like it sounds, this is a way of having an array of, let's say, here are our best practices and desired outcomes, how close or how have we deviated from these. It can also be personnel management as well. You have 8 variables that you're judging a responsible attorney or timekeeper on, and here's how they've graded. Also, this is known as ghost billing. There's AFAs versus the traditional billing hour arrangement. And so you're keeping track of whether you're actually saving money by using an AFA, and to what degree you are, if AFAs are having their desired effect. A few other examples: you have the total spend by life of matter by type. The 5-year trend is the way we've seen it, and then you also have the average cycle time by matter per attorney. Five-year trend, really sort of spotting the outliers in terms of if there's anyone that's taking more time than they should. The last one, very important, legal spend ROI, taking a look at the total exposed liability. In other words, what you could end up paying versus what you actually do end up paying, and sort of a measure of the mitigation efforts that your folks in the law department made to make sure that you didn't have a full payout. Think Deepwater Horizon, think natural disasters, and those types of things.
So, guys, qualitative metrics are really sort of where KPIs and this sort of exercise, we think, can get really fun, right? I mean, as opposed to quantitative, where it's charting numbers around sort of empirical data and empirical sort of performance. Qualitative measures allow us to really sort of expand the experience. And tie some sort of sort of subjectivity to it, so that we can understand how, as an organization, we're performing vis-a-vis our goals, whether they're departmental goals, practice goals, organizational goals, revenue goals, et cetera. And that's why sort of taking various types of numbers, creating dimensionality around it, comparing the dimensions, and then looking for causal relationships between them really starts to sort of light the engine up. The same is true. We've got a list of qualitative measures for law firms. Similar types of scenarios, but different impact, of course, right? I mean, the impact of internal budgeting and how lawyers perform against how the organization, the law firm, has sort of built its development goals. Success of AFAs is sort of interesting because to some degree they're compared against empirical data. But in a qualitative sort of sense, we can step away from measurement against the billable hour and start to create new measurements by which we define our relationships with our own clients. Things like success and outcome around AFA-derived matters and programs to a greater degree help us sort of define the work that we do and the relationships that we build with our clients. Same is true, for things like cost recovery policies. We've sort of had those in place for many years and many types of iterations with them, but they've always just sort of been sort of there. How effective are we in the diligence around them? There's a couple of other qualitative KPIs because, of course, sort of charting the metrics, charting the course is an important part of this. We've kind of mapped out to demonstrate the scenario as well. A couple of sort of perhaps more sort of engaging sets of metrics. Matter efficiency, which we defined in this particular sort of scenario as the number of attorneys assigned by matter versus matter profitability. Profitability, of course, also being a derived measurement, not sort of a piece of raw data. It's not just billings, but it's sort of billings against cost to an organization, and looking for causal relationships between do the number of attorneys we assign to a matter actually sort of affect. In this particular example, in the litigation group, there's a clear sort of correlation between the more attorneys assigned and the diminished profitability, but it's exactly the opposite in mergers and acquisitions. Those are sort of important metrics, important dynamics, anyways, to understand. Intensity of relationship is another example. It is the measure of the number of face-to-face meetings with clients versus the value of the business by the client. Does the more time we spend face-to-face with a client actually inure to better business, more business, and billings with the client? I think for this particular organization on this slide, it's a bit of a mixed bag, and so perhaps can drive a sort of impact in how we define how we build a practice. Certainly, rechart, of course, if a direction that we've taken doesn't pan out. So, what about the impact of qualitative metrics? These can seem sort of straightforward. If we get excited about this topic a little bit, I think it's because there can be some real measurable, direct impact both at strategic and tactical levels. I mean, they're designed to provide us real-time insight into current activities, help us sort of understand the models that we've built for our own businesses and how we drive them, and how to correct if we need. Certainly, test our own assumptions about what we think will drive our businesses and our organizations, and understand whether they worked or not. They offer us sort of internal numbers. They give us a way of organizing around a set of activities that distill it down to one number that we can understand and a dial that we can see move, so that we can work around it. And certainly they drive our ability to create performance roadmaps. All right, so how can we actually use KPIs for benchmarking? So there's a few sort of important dynamics at play here. First, it's access to the data. We've spent over the last many years, as we've talked about earlier, creating and implementing systems in our organizations to manage the work that lawyers and professional staff at law firms and law departments do. There are a number of systems, many enterprise, many also niche, and that drive individual sort of practice areas. In generally, sort of separate and apart from each other because the competencies and the disciplines that drive them are varied and distinct. So the important note is to find ways to aggregate that data, to pull the data together so that we can create models that make sense and that certainly can speak across the organization. Looking at any set of data in a single dimension is about as effective as looking at a metric in a single dimension. We know it doesn't tell the whole story. The other part of it, of understanding metrics, is not just sort of how we define our own performance, but how we compare against our peers. We need some sort of benchmarks to understand whether our performance is good, bad, leading, trailing, and how sort of as an organization, understanding sort of comparatively how we rate and perform is important to drive areas for improvement. And again, as a comparative tool, the KPIs really sort of look to drive performance daily and sort of ongoing monitoring, defining trends, and certainly spotting hot spots, right? That litigation spike in the other chart that we showed helped us also to define the predictability of outcomes and costs, give us sort of much better leverage around the businesses, the large and diverse businesses that we all are entrusted with running. All right, so we promised you guys, a discussion as well about how to build, right, a legal KPI program. So there's a couple of background slides that we've prepared to sort of talk about, KPIs and the way that organizations can do approach them, as an organizational basis. So potential roadblocks to KPIs. We've polled again, sort of as part of our ongoing polling support of the organization. What users sort of cited as major impediments to metrics and perhaps a little bit more broadly to performance management. Lack of well-defined metrics was by far, the highest reported impediment. 3/4 of respondents, and again, that's sort of part of what this presentation is about, and the ELM practice that we've built are designed to sort of address. We know we have access to all this data, but how do we actually sort of work with it? Lack of information or data comes in sort of a pretty close second, as well as due to the lack of tools, which are interesting responses given all the work and time we spent over the last many years in implementing those. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how to, KPIs are not about throwing the baby out with the bath water, but sort of understanding both the data that we have, the tools that we have, and how we actually can start to use them. It's not about sort of needing to buy a whole new set of technologies, and it's a continuum. You start with one level of sophistication and work your way up. Technology to deliver information in the form of KPIs, right? So, or in order to develop, rather, KPIs. What we know is that historically, e-billing systems and to a smaller degree, matter management systems, and certainly as they're considered two separate systems, oftentimes they're considered one and the same, have always been the first line of defense for organizations. I think what we lament as an organization, having worked with these systems for so many years, is that with 20 years of matter management and slightly fewer than that for e-billing systems, right, that there's still an enormous immaturity in the way we use those systems. And so a tremendous amount of headroom, if you will, in what we can do with existing technologies, reporting capabilities, data and analytics capabilities, even if only to understand what it is that we want to do with the technology. Reporting tools and other sort of enterprise financial systems and the like are part of the enterprises, and there are lots of opportunities to use them. What we find interesting is that a full third of the organizations are still using Excel only as their tools for metrics. And we're not sort of opposed to Excel. I mean, that's probably the least mature tool there, but even it can be a powerful tool for understanding metrics. Again, it's all about how you organize around the data that we have and aggregate that to develop metrics that we can then sort of report, monitor, and act on.
Okay, so now let's talk about ensuring the reliability of your KPIs. You do already have systems in place tracking data, whether it's relational databases, Excel, your time and billing software, your ELM software, either matter management or e-billing, your practice management software for IT, case management, contract management, document management, and CRM, things along those lines. You've got your financial systems, you've got third-party databases, and, on top of that, you also have all kinds of manual systems in place. These data sources need to be identified and looked at for the quality of the data that they provide. When you're looking for a platform to drive your analytics, it should be said that combining your data sources into a single platform is actually very beneficial. Whether you combine them through an integration process or establish a data warehouse, or in fact, pick some third-party system that you're going to use to house your data. Whatever platform you pick should provide the best possible analytics. Consider whether or not you need a dashboard capability in order to present back information visually. And Eyal was talking about Excel before. Even Excel, using that as your analytics tool is better than managing by anecdote. At least then you have decisions being run off of data from from solid numbers within your organization. So you also need to question whether or not you have the expertise on staff to do this. Who already knows how to do this sort of thing? Who has the capability in working with the different technologies that you might be working with? And how do you develop talent who can interpret numbers? Being able to visually look at data and have it talk to you is an extraordinary skill, but it is something that can be taught. So, you might look at the people within your organization and see, who is adept at this sort of thing and bring them onto the team. You can't have this just in the hands of one individual. Next slide. And so when we finally get some metrics being presented back to us, Chris had said earlier in the presentation that this is really just the beginning. You've done all this work, and now you're finally at the starting line. You need to look at the data that's being presented back to you and ask yourself, is this what I expected to see? With all that I know about my organization up until now, is this visually telling me through hard data points what it was I expected? And if it's not, then you need to investigate why. And there can be a lot of different reasons as to why the data is coming back unexpectedly. First off, you can have multiple systems that have essentially the same kind of data, but that's being reported differently because it's being entered in each of those different systems. You need to determine which system is the source of the data, and then understanding that, you can try to discern why the data is telling you what it does, whereas the same data in different systems tells you a completely different story. You may ask yourself when we talk about whether the data is being entered efficiently, if we've got these multiple data points or the same data points in multiple systems, well, would it be better served if we were to create some sort of integration in order to streamline the data entry, but more importantly, it also streamlines the quality of the data being presented back in the systems? And then there's also the question of, the data itself. Is it possible that if you look at it field by field and see the information that's been tracked in the system, you might find some very surprising information that's being stored in a particular field. Question is, why is it there? Where did it come from? And how is that system populating the data? Is it a free entry field that might be better served as a drop-down field? Is it something that's coming from a different system where this other system needs to have some controls put on the data entry?
So in addition to sort of understanding the data, right, and how we get it, we also need to understand our audiences, right, and identify them. Recent sort of another sort of polling result on reporting lines for metrics saw significantly high near universal responses for reporting developed for general counsel and senior attorneys. This is for law department reporting. And we expect that, right? We expect that, the systems are built for reporting with the general counsel sort of needs and the senior staff, the senior professional staff at hand. What we find sort of interesting and, both new and growing is certainly the focus on the staff attorneys, right? Giving tools to the staff professionals to do their work on a day-to-day and ongoing basis, giving them insight into the matters and practices that they're working in, and certainly allowing them to leverage on an institutional and organizational level the experiences that they have at their fingertips, but then also the C-suite level, really starting to sort of filter the legal reporting, particularly the qualitative reporting to the CEO, CFO, COO, and the like, really sort of start to understand the role of the legal organization as a part of the broader org and how they interplay. The most interesting thing about this, and I think sort of the realization for many, is that it's the same raw data that feeds all of these reporting lines. It's still it's all of the same systems. It's just that we formulate the metrics and the way that we report them up, the way that we aggregate data and create data models around understanding that data that differs. And therein sort of lies the power of the systems we have to report against.
Okay. Now, having said everything we've said, now the question is, how do you go about developing your own KPI program? And we've got these steps laid out for you here on this slide. First, create a mission statement. This will be the one or two sentence statement of intent that everything will tie back to as you go. This will be the sort of the guiding principle. Step two, identify the processes and the behaviors you want to track. That is really, do the investigation of what is it, what metrics do we need, or what do we need to find in order to manage most optimally. Step three, identify your audience, which Eyal just talked about. Figure out who it is that's going to be digesting the data and how you'll need to shape that data, and then develop problem statements. By a problem statement, we say, this can encompass a goal or frame a trend that you're seeking to monitor. These are often straightforward expressions. The issue is, the problem is, for instance, the problem is that we have one outside firm that is overshooting its budgets and is consistently revising those budgets. Okay, so what should, in a like matter, cost and what should we expect? That's something that you could put very succinctly as a problem statement. Step four, craft data models and therefore KPIs. In other words, how are you going to compile and calculate and aggregate the data that you need, and how are you going to come up with these KPIs, and what KPIs are you going to use? Step five, evaluate your existing data sources and integrations. This goes back to a lot of what Jane had talked about earlier, looking at where the data is coming from, what your central reporting source is, and how well it all integrates, and really do an assessment of if there needs to be tweaking or any modifications to your system. Step six, this is really fairly important, that at this point you've engaged into this process very intensely, and enough so that you may realize you have the ability to measure things that you didn't realize at first that you could. Or the process will reveal other problems and other issues that weren't apparent to you at first that you now want to measure. So this step presents you an opportunity to extend your program's reach as well as its richness. Step seven, announce and implement a formal KPI initiative. In other words, roll it out very deliberately, let everyone know that this is what you'll be doing, and sort of get everyone on board and involved in the process. Final step is to collect data over time, because not all of the KPIs that you want to track will be readily available with current data. So you'll want to set yourself up so that you're measuring over time. Oftentimes, 3 years out and 5 years out can result in strong and telling and valuable drivers for performance and process improvements.
So next steps. Eyal loves to say no one builds a dial to stare at it. You need to do something with this stuff. You put in all this time and effort. So the first step, really, you need to meet on a regular basis to look at your KPIs and interpret what does it mean to your organization. If the results aren't as expected, then you need to investigate why is that. Is there something wrong with your assumptions? Is perhaps the measurement correct, but you were measuring the wrong thing? Are there data issues that are at the at the very base of this? And then tweak, adjust, or restart with your KPIs as necessary. Obviously, a KPI is one of the goals of your organization and tracking your progress towards the completion of that goal. Once you see that something has become part of your standard operating procedure and the goal has in fact been achieved, well, then it's time to start measuring something else. Really, this idea of understanding the causality and impacting processes and behavior, this is what causes the dial to move. You need to outline an action plan to address whatever was the subject of your metric if you find that you aren't getting the results that you wanted or it's taking too long to achieve your goals. And then just move on with it. Perhaps there's something that you need to address with an individual or an organization in order to get the right result. But in any way, you're doing something with your data. I would say this as well. When we talk about developing a KPI program, you've got a lot of systems out there with a lot of data in it. When was the last time you looked at the reports in those systems? There might, in fact, already be some good information in there already that you could build on for your KPI program. And that is it.
Guys, we've got a little bit of extra time for questions. I saw that there were a few questions about getting access to the slides and how to download those. Maybe we can ask Elliot to sort of speak on those if there are any sort of outstanding issues there. Let me know if there are any sort of other, more sort of substantive questions about the presentation. One thing we'll know, we have a trend view on our, Hyperion maintains a research website at www.hgpresearch.com, and we have a trend view on performance management metrics and KPIs. I'm going to push the URL to you guys in this presentation. You can go on up to there, download the KPI, the document. It's a for-purchase document for all the attendees on this conference. We provided a coupon code to get that report for free. It includes over 100 KPIs and sort of measurements for legal organizations, broken down, by sort of discipline and practice areas. So we hope it's a useful tool for you guys. And that's it. We'll turn that back over to Bill.
Yeah, there are a couple questions that came in, and we can help the audience out. If you missed any part of this presentation, it will be archived by tomorrow, so you can see it again, or you can refer someone to it. So for those of you who want to know about the archived version. Also, if you refresh your console, and you can do that by hitting the F5 button, it's usually above your numbers key. You'll refresh your console. You'll see that in the Resource Center widget, you should be able to download a copy of today's presentation, and that should be useful for you. If you can't, just send in a question, and we'll be able to email you a copy of the presentation. We do have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to ask the group a question or two, if you don't mind. Is there any size law firm that benefits the most from the process that you spoke about and putting in place key performance indicators, or is it just for larger organizations, or do you see the benefit for smaller ones as well?
Well, I'll take the first cut at that. No, I don't think that there's any size restriction on it whatsoever. It's in fact, I think sort of generally our perspective is that the needs of smaller law firms are no less sophisticated than large law firms. It's just that scale obviously and resources often are sort of issues that are more acute for the smaller organizations. But performance management, right? How are we doing, and can we do better? And are there ways to sort of better leverage the resources that we have? We call it sort of bang for the buck, but it's not just about being more efficient. It's also about sort of understanding and developing more quality outcomes in the work that we do. That inures not only to our own satisfaction, certainly it's got direct impact on an organization's bottom line, but also the satisfaction of our clients. So yeah, it's a sort of across the board. I think the one thing you'll find in the larger organization, as opposed to the smaller law firm, is that the number of sources of data are many more, and the amount of data. So the tools that you have to be able to use and understand in order to sort of understand, simply much sort of greater volumes and perhaps more complexity of data in order to sort of be effective in a metric program. The other I think sort of point then that's parallel to that is organizational metrics at an organizational level are worthwhile to be sure, but oftentimes there's some real impact in understanding metrics at the practice level. Sometimes, depending on the organization, by practice and by office, understanding the type of law, because different practice areas simply work in different ways, and so tackling it, perhaps not sort of on the ground, but maybe a few feet above it, is just as important as understanding the 30,000-foot view.
No, that's a really good point. Just one real quick question before we wrap it up. Jane, you talked a little bit about the human element and finding someone in your organization who, with the data, will speak to them, or they're good with data. From your experience, how should a law firm go about, appointing someone to be in charge of such a, important part of evaluating, where their company obviously, needs help? Where have you seen it work successfully in the past? What types of individuals, or has one person been appointed, or a team that leads different parts of the organization? What's been your experience?
Okay, well, one of the hallmarks of these types of people that I've seen is that they're people who pay attention to the information being presented back to them on the screen. In my earlier life, I worked at one of the e-billing vendors, and with the people who were working for me, it was really easy for me to see who it was who was able to pick up subtle nuances in terms of what was being presented back. They typically have good command of the processes and operations within the law firm. They have some organizational knowledge. They've got some history that they understand. All that serves as a really great starting point. But, where people have jumped out to me is when somebody's come to me and said, hey, I noticed something here, and that, is typically the point where I kind of shake my head and think, yep, I was right. This one has it. This one has the talent. This is exactly what I hope to happen. Nurturing that sort of talent and expanding their knowledge of the organization, of the systems that are being used, of the data that's in those systems, all that is part of nurturing the talent. But sometimes just letting them have a go at the data itself and having them tell you what it says to them can be a good exercise in helping to develop these types of abilities.
Excellent point. Any final thoughts?
Just an idea.
Before we wrap?
I was going to say, just as an aside, I ended up teaching 6 people how to do this to the point where they were equal to me in terms of their abilities to read data. It was really quite extraordinary. It can, in fact, be taught.
Excellent. Well, I am sorry to say, but that is about all the time we have for this webcast. But don't log off yet. Give us a couple more seconds of your time. We have some parting information for you. I'd like to thank you for joining us. We hope it was valuable to you. A special thanks to our guests, Yael, Jane, and Christopher, for their time and their insights. Also, a special thank you to Hyperion for their support. Again, if you missed any part of this presentation, it will be archived by tomorrow and will be archived for a few months, so you can view it again, or you can refer someone to it. Also, you can go to the Resource Center widget. You should be able to copy to your desktop the presentation, and that may be useful for you in the future as well. Again, my name is Elliot Markowitz. Have a great afternoon, everybody.